All right. Well, welcome to another episode of the show. As you can see, it's a little bit different. We have a new room that we're using. I have a new co-host that I'll introduce here in a second. The Three Presbyteers is something that will still happen periodically. Other pastors will come and join. Before that happens on our regular show going forward, we're going to kind of rebrand it, rename it, and still be talking about Christian living and just life in general. And so I am Dr. Logan Castle and this is my new co-host.
Hi, I'm Body Camp Dan.
And Body Camp Dan is here to keep it real. Dan, you are from California.
Don't tell anyone. Yeah.
I know. That's the thing is all of us West Coasters are slowly taking over the East Coast.
Well, there's a reason.
And yet, we still insist that the West Coast is the best.
Well, I don't know about that. A lot of people insist the West Coast is the best, but over 200,000 people left it last year. So, I mean, and that's just the state of California.
I left California when I was 5, so I was ahead of the curve.
You're better off for it.
I was born there.
Well, you're a pastor and I'm not.
It was drawn out of the wilderness, right? So today's episode we're going to talk about is murder. And so being from California, I feel like you would know a lot about murder. What are your thoughts on murder, California, and the Bible?
That's a good reason for you to want to get your family out of California, that's for sure.
Move to body camp.
Move to body camp. Sounds like body count, but
It's a real place.
yeah.
Well, it's not actually a town, is it?
It's not. It's just a little community within a unincorporated part of the county, so which is the way I like it.
So, anyway, so we're doing a sermon series right now. We're talking about Moses and his life. And, if you look at the life of Moses, it started in the same kind of situation where Pharaoh he didn't know Joseph or any of it'd been 400 years since any major biblical person had been alive. And so he did not like the Israelites. And so he decided that they were having too many kids. It was too big of a problem. And so partial genocide was in order, and that they needed to kill off every male offspring that came um, from the Israelite children. And so, interestingly, one of the things that I was talking about with the youth group was this idea that did you know the Bible actually has at least two really good places where you can argue that God blesses people when they lie?
When they lie,
Hmm.
no, I cannot think of a single instance where God blesses people when they lie.
Yeah. So in Exodus chapter 2, it talks about how the midwives of the Egyptians were there with the Israelite women,
Hmm.
and Pharaoh told them to kill the babies as soon as they came out. And then they just lied to them and they lied to Pharaoh and they said that these women they just deliver so quick and so fast, we just can't get, to it. And it says God blessed them. So he's not actually blessing them for lying, but he's blessing them with the bigger idea. And
Hmm.
you also see that with Rahab when she's uh, hiding the spies from being detected.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that you see is that God once again blesses someone, and I would make the argument that God will bless someone when they're preserving life.
I'd agree with that. There's quite a few things I would do to protect innocence, and that's probably one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just a funny, interesting side note. But yeah, so as Moses is born, it says that he was righteous in the eyes of God up until his 3 month time on Earth. It's not really a birthday. I don't know what you call it, but and so it's kind of interesting because you've got 4 kids and well, you have eight kids.
Hmm.
So you've been around 3 month olds before.
Eight and one in heaven. Hmm.
Hmm. Isn't it hard to believe that God could bless or be happy with a three month old? Have you ever been happy with a 3 month old?
I love babies. That's for sure.
That's right. You're one of these.
Yeah, I see. Unfortunately, man, I'm around, especially when ours were little. It's like having rose-colored glass, lenses on.
Mhm.
They bring a lot of joy, and I tend not to look at the sleeplessness or the getting thrown up on or, changing diapers. So I'm kind of a one-off when it comes to babies.
Yeah. It was funny. I had a friend who was so excited to have their kid, and then once they had him, decided he didn't like babies. Like
Well,
at
there
all.
you go.
Have you seen that happen
Live
before?
and learn.
Fun fact: I don't like babies.
Yeah.
I won't carry your baby. I won't hold your baby. I definitely am not going to change your baby.
What makes you qualified to hold my baby?
I don't, I don't want to hold your baby. I don't hold anyone's baby.
Oh, my youngest is 3 right now. He's almost too big for it anyhow, and he's kind of wild.
3 months old. And then, right, so the story goes that he was put in a basket. They covered it in tar,
Hmm.
waterproofed it, and then Moses' sister walked across the and reeds along with it. They put it upriver from where the princess of Egypt would be, and this baby comes in. And like most, young girls, she's like, "It's a baby!"
It's a baby.
Right?
Yeah,
And so
that could have been me. I'd have been out there. It's a baby.
you scooped
Yeah,
it up.
we scooped it up, man.
I would have been like, It's a baby." And that's right by me.
Yeah,
That's weird.
yeah,
That's,
well,
well, I don't know. Maybe I'd save the baby, but I definitely wouldn't adopt it.
yeah, good thing God saved your spirit for a
I'm okay.
21st century
Adoption is a very good thing. It's not my
California.
natural.
It's all right.
It's an important thing. I sound terrible. It's great. So,
The body of Christ has different parts, right?
right.
Some of us are meant for different purposes. So,
Yeah, I'm a
yeah,
lot more in the fire, um, kind of fighting part of it, dealing with adolescents, youth ministry attitudes, a different kind of attitude. Like they're different than babies, but in some ways,
well, I'll tell you what, youth these days definitely have a different attitude towards death in general, not just murder.
hmm,
I mean, it's the influence they do or don't get off of all the different channels coming into their lives is kind of crazy. Their apathy I
yes.
mean, is incredible towards death, human suffering, murder. I mean, it's pretty unbelievable.
Well, that's one of the things, right? Why is murder bad? Why, in the eyes of God, why would you say murder is wrong?
Well, I just start off with the fact that murder is one of the Ten Commandments. Um,
This is before the Ten
mm,
Commandments, though. How don't they know?
uh, I think you had Cain and Abel
Hmm.
as the very first example of murder. You watched God immediately curse Cain for his actions and condemn, his murdering his brother.
Sure.
So if God condemns it from the very beginning, which I don't know how much further you can go back than those two, I'd say, murder's wrong.
Yeah, you'd say
Now,
the law is written on your heart. Because I mean, there's been instances where they've talked to like people in very primitive tribes and things, and they would murder one another and everything. And maybe a missionary goes in and leads the whole group to Christ, and they start speaking a common language. And then what happens is they're like, "Yeah, we knew murdering was wrong the whole time." Like, of course you did.
I think God builds a lot of that into who we are, regardless of whether or not we have a lot of biblical knowledge.
And the other thing I would say is it's the fact that you're destroying God's image. So we're image bearers. It makes it different than killing an animal, which God has allowed us to do at this point in history, right? So you're destroying an image bearer of God. And so even if you're playing something as simple as a video game like Minecraft, for instance, you're still or you're playing something and they're aliens or the aliens have very human likeness in a lot of games, or you're playing Doom or Wolfenstein or one of the more violent games, especially the modern iterations of them. Are absolutely brutal, which adds to your argument of this idea that they're they're causing a numbness, this apathy, right? This,
Desensitizing.
mhm. And but you're even in these video games, you're going over and over again through killing image bearers. And I think that has a fundamental effect on how you value life, how you look at life, and if it has value, and so maybe you look at some more superficial things about what causes life to have value
Sure.
as you start playing in all the other horrible things of the world of racism and other aspects like that, and you start making it us versus them. Satan loves when we get into a space where we're comparing and finding differences, right? And there's only one race, and that's the human race. There are different ethnicities, but it's not the same as a race. Everybody has the same fundamental basis in their GPA, DNA.
I agree. I think if you start desensitizing people or young people in general on an issue some as extreme as human suffering or murder, and you get them to subliminally accept committing those acts, I think the issue is not really that you may have to worry that that young person may go out and murder someone. I think the issue is that it becomes acceptable for them to start for them to start accepting so many other, I guess, derivatives of that. So they may not grow up to murder anybody, but they might not make a great father. They might not treat their children the way that they should because they're desensitized on a fundamental level, or they might not make a great husband or wife, or they might not. I just think that if you debase a human spirit on that level, they're just going to be kind of a mutation of what God wanted them to be.
Sure, he gives them over to a depraved mind, and it's acting in the flesh when you murder someone. That's the extreme version. I mean, that's being spiritual influences tend to go into that, and it's not something that initially happens right away. It happens in a moment of weakness and vulnerability most often. I mean, yes, we talked about serial killers, and those are people that are premeditating this and enjoying the act.
Like
How
this guy in Idaho,
this guy in Idaho just blows my mind.
Koberger.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, that was pretty disgusting all the way around to read the reports and all.
Still really suspicious in the whole. I mean, because there's no struggle or anything, and so
Yeah, it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder if he was the only one involved. It makes you wonder a lot of things, you
right.
know. Yeah, it just to be able to for a person to be able to do something like that to four grown adults
Hmm.
in the fashion that he did. But then again, let's go back to being able to desensitize a human being to basic human suffering or death. Some reports were saying that Koberger was a criminal justice PhD student. I
Hmm.
believe, correct me if I'm wrong, was it Washington State?
No,
Okay.
I don't know.
Was it Idaho? Okay.
Maybe he wasn't in Washington, but the event happened in Idaho.
Right, but he was a PhD student in Washington, though,
Right.
I think. Hmm.
You can't trust people with doctorate degrees.
Well, this guy, I just read that one of the specific things that he had done was he had gone in and canvassed a number of different criminals, murderers,
Hmm.
and wanted to know their inner thoughts and inner workings as to how they would select victims.
Hmm.
And I mean, who knows if he had those underlying tendencies previous to, doing that study, but there you have a person who's doing a study on murder
Hmm.
of innocence, and before you know it, not just become desensitized to it, but he's so mentally unstable that he actually goes and commits those acts. It's pretty horrific. I can't even imagine the horror those families are going through right now.
Yeah. And so we talk about that with, well, Moses, I mean, he was older than me, but when he was 40, it says that he found a
When
heart
you
where
say he was older than me, you mean he wasn't quite as old as Body Camp Dan? Is that what you're getting at? Somewhere between you and me. All right.
yeah,
All right.
yeah. Maybe
So
when maybe that's his version of a midlife crisis. I don't know.
happens to the best of us.
Something.
So when he was 40,
When he was 40, he gained a heart for the Hebrew people, the Israelites, and he went out and doesn't give you a lot of details. I know I was watching the movie, like the cartoon version of it recently. I'm going to use as a teaching point, but he goes out and he sees that one of his people are being abused, and he's a prince of Egypt. He's adopted into the kingdom, and he ends up killing this guy. And then he gets really paranoid about whether or not people see him commit the act. And then a few days later, he goes back and he sees two Israelites that are fighting with one another. And when they're fighting with one another, they say, "Hey, you're going to murder us too?" Right? And he's like I thought they would understand, you know?
and I consider I mean, I'm just going at it from a defense angle. He murdered that Egyptian because that Egyptian was basically beating to death or whipping an Israelite.
Sure.
So, I mean, at that point, I guess he was a government official, if you will,
Oh yeah.
and he saw. one of his subordinates, that Egyptian whatever slave master,
Hmm.
hurting this Israelite, you know, he stepped up and handled business. I can't really say it would be an unrighteous kill. It wasn't supposed to do that. You weren't supposed to murder Egyptians for hurting what they considered to be
A lesser.
a lesser person. So,
Yeah, and then he runs away, right? He
hmm
finds love. See, make a great movie.
okay, he goes to the well.
Hmm.
He goes to the well, and she's there watering her flock, and he saves her from some bad guys.
Hmm.
I'm gonna give you the theologian's version of it. So,
Thanks. I know that.
you're welcome.
I just can't remember her name.
Yeah, her dad's impressed with him, and so on, right?
So he gives his daughter in marriage for it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And they don't. It doesn't talk about her very often.
So he was kind of a stud at 40. I mean, he was, you know, or maybe plus a couple years.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, so some of us older guys, we haven't lost it yet. So
maybe he had old man strength.
could have been old man strength.
I'm not
Uh,
really sure when that switch turns.
well, we might lose a little quickness, but never the power, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, so Moses, he grows this compassion for Israelites at or about 40 plus.
Mhm.
And then what?
And then he ends up having the encounter with the angel in the burning bush. And God says, I will send you to Egypt, which is interesting because he's lived in Egypt his whole life. But God has him set apart to go and to free his people, and that he's heard their cries for deliverance from their oppressors.
And he gives him a partner.
It's because he couldn't speak very well. So he gives him Aaron,
Mhm.
and so Aaron becomes his partner. Yeah, and we'll get into that more in maybe some future episodes. But I mean, that's kind of like this, right?
Yeah. Body Camp Dan and PhD Logan.
But I can't do any cool tricks. I can't turn a staff into a snake or anything like that. So
Probably would walk out of here if you did.
freak you out.
Yeah. I'm a little more down to earth than that.
Let's see. Murder as a whole, and we're looking at the life of murder. Like, is there any other thoughts that you've had that come up with murder, or do you know anyone that's ever been killed
Um,
or lived close to an absolutely horrible situation?
Accidental death? Yes. But are we just specifically talking about murder?
Oh, what were
Because
you?
those are different things.
I know, that's true.
I mean, I lost a brother when I was 16,
Uh-huh.
and he was accidentally killed by a vehicle
Right.
that was going probably a little too fast.
Hmm.
And that gentleman felt
Sure.
absolutely
It
horrible.
wasn't his intent.
No, I think that he felt such a good amount of guilt that he sold everything he owned and moved out of the state. So as far as accidental death, yeah, I mean, I'd say from a fairly early age on, I've known death or loss.
Hmm.
But as far as someone who's been killed, I'd have to think long and hard, I guess. Nothing really. No, nobody that's been murdered, I guess. No, but quite a few instances of people who unfortunately lost their lives.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a lot of them in my head. I don't know. There was a lot of brutal things that happened in the like growing up.
Oh, did you know anybody who was?
I don't personally, I had weird connections with people. Like, for instance, someone dumped the body in a trash can behind a Safeway. And then that was like 4 or 5 years later, when I was in one of my training for classes for the military. I ended up meeting that victim's best friend in the Air Force.
Hmm.
Just weird stuff like that. The town that I grew up in was called Battleground, and it's kind of funny because there was no battle in Battleground ever. It,
Hmm.
it was the Native Americans and the cowboys or the
It was more
settlers.
like a
They were
massacre.
supposed no 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 no. They planned ahead of time. We're gonna have a battle, and then the chief died, and everybody called it off. And they're like, yeah, we don't really feel like fighting now, so whatever. And then they never had a battle, and then that was the battleground that they were going to allegedly have said battle.
Where's Battleground, Washington at? Is it outside of Seattle?
No, it's straight down the I-5. That is
Is it closer to Oregon?
yes, it's right above Portland, Oregon.
So this could have been like the Nez Perce tribe. they back in the day, their territory covered Washington, Oregon, Idaho,
I don't know
and
what
they were
tribe.
one of the biggest.
Sure.
I'm just fond of them because they're the ones who are responsible for the Appaloosa horse, which is my favorite. But anyhow, so
Oh,
yeah, I'm sure they saw plenty of murder.
I like Umpqua tribe because they make my favorite ice cream.
There you go. Well, the Nez Perce make my favorite horse. Almost the same thing.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, because I was going to ask you what your favorite animal was, anyways. And is it specifically that?
Oh yeah, I don't think there's anything else on this earth like a horse. So many different aspects to a horse, I think. God, when he made Adam and then, or actually, I think the horse came first. So God made the horse and then he's like, I know exactly what to do after this. I think he made that horse knowing what he was going to do next when he made a rider. I've got a very kind of special belief about that. But yeah, what
I've
about
never
you?
heard anything like that
What?
before.
Well, I guess if you go, just think about those 6 days of creation.
Hmm.
He made the horse first, and I mean, you look at all the different attributes of a horse and everything that they have done and achieved throughout history. They were the tractors, they were the big rigs, they were everything prior to the
Hmm.
modern engines,
Yeah.
warfare, you name it. In fact, they pair so well with man. There's no other animal like them, not a single one.
I'm still a big fan of bears.
Well, there you go.
They're kind of like,
Who's that save a bear enough to ride it? I'm sure they'd be.
I think that would be so cool.
Yeah.
Actually fed a grizzly bear one time. I fed him some ding dongs
All
and
right.
he licked me in the face.
Okay.
It was really scary. Tiger King.
You went to the Tiger King.
I camped at the Tiger King's property. I rented a cabin and then
Talk about murder. I know. They were feeding people to.
yeah, I did actually. I got a special tour to meet
I,
Ozzy the grizzly bear,
okay. I thought that's what you were gonna say that.
and he also likes Mountain Dew. I mean, it's absolutely horrible to think about that and the other guy, I can't remember his name, the guy that has the two prosthetic legs,
All right.
that's in the show. Like I've got pictures with him.
You have Tiger King fame.
I'm
Wow.
not sure that's fame. That might be
Well,
fame.
okay. Well, whichever. On the internet, it's a
I've got a
50-50.
certificate that he signed. I adopted a grizzly bear,
Okay.
and then he licked me in the face, which was really scary because my head would fit in his mouth. Like it's just so big.
Yeah.
And the other thing about bears and murder is that bears eat each other. They're cannibalistic animals. And so I know we were talking about that before, but I don't think horses eat one another.
No, they don't. No, horses do, do not. They will do a lot of other things up and late. Actually, horses murder each other. They just don't do it by eating each other. And
Hmm. You got
it's,
to tell them about your horse really quick as we finish up the episode. What's your horse's name?
oh, his name is Jiffy Joe. Yeah. Jiffy Joe is a wild Mustang. He's 6 years old. He was born in Antelope Valley, Nevada.
Wow.
And I think he was captured by the BLM at about 2 years old, welded, and then sent to a BLM facility where I think they gentled him down and shipped him off to an adoption center. But he's a good horse. He's being slow cooked. A lot of trust issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So you're gonna eat them.
well, yeah. I mean, I don't need murder happening either way with Jiffy Joe.
Hmm.
Me, him to me. So we're taking it slow.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's a really good place to leave on our uh, first episode. So we're gonna rename the channel. We're gonna name it Secondhand Saints. And the idea is that we were once members of the kingdom of darkness, but since receiving Christ, that we are now saints and ambassadors of Christ as part of his kingdom. Yeah, it just came to me. All right. Thanks, guys.
Sounds good to me.